All right, what's going on, guys? Dan Watson, and if you've been following me at all, you know I pretty much only recommended one brand of drones, and that is, until now, you've probably seen this. This is my favorite for a long time, the DJI Mavic 2 Pro. You might not have seen this new one. This is the Autel Evo 2 Pro, and if you have not seen a lot on this, prepare to be amazed because this thing is just crazy awesome. Let's kind of dig in these two drones that are absolutely awesome and see the differences between them and which is going to be the best drone on the market today. So right away, the Evo 2 Pro really stands out. It's kind of a unique design. It has all orange. It might be a love-hate relationship with that kind of design on there, but for sure, it does stand out a little bit more in the sky, so it's a bit easier to see. It is also a bit larger than the Mavic 2 Pro, which might be a little bit of a disadvantage. I mean, not to the point where I can't fit it in my bag or anything like that, but it does take up a little bit more space. Thankfully, that means it has a larger battery. So you can get about 31 minutes on the Mavic 2 Pro of flight time, and on the Evo 2, they have it rated to 40 minutes. In my experience, I will typically land the Mavic 2 Pro when it gets about 20-25%, and at that time, I am still floating in the 30s on the Mavic 2 Pro, or on the Evo 2 Pro. So that means an extra 5-10 minutes in the sky, and that can make a huge difference when you're actually filming. Keep in mind, these might have 30-40 minute run times. You might think, why do I want to record for 30 minutes? You don't, because you don't want to land these things at 0% battery. So typically when it gets to about 50%, especially if I'm in the wind, I am bringing it home to land early so I don't run out of battery in there. So last year I was out in Iceland with the Mavic 2 Pro. Winds were so crazy. I dropped about 30% in battery just getting to where I wanted to shoot. So having a few extra minutes in the air actually shooting is massive. Now, there are definitely those times where you can't actually fly a drone on location. Maybe you just can't get there in general. So you guys need to check out Storyblocks. So Storyblocks is an affordable online subscription service, and it offers unlimited downloads and over 1 million pieces of high quality assets. And I'm talking 4K stock videos, templates, music, sound effects, and so much more. So obviously there's a ton of absolutely epic video clips you can use, but I'm also a huge fan of using Storyblocks to find overlays like smoke or fog to use in my videos, give them some extra movement and dimension. So go ahead and check out the link in the video description, or you can head to Storyblocks/Dan Watson and download some awesome footage today. Now I do want to show you guys these two remotes because there's actually kind of a lot of difference between them right here. Now both have a screen in them, but where the DJI just shows you some basic functions in this calculator style font, the Evo 2 Pro gives you a full color display. In fact, you can actually set it and see your image straight on here without a phone, which is not the recommended way of doing it, but you can do it if you need your phone for something else or don't have it with you. Now ergonomics on them is kind of a toss-up for me. The Evo 2 kind of holds the phone a little bit easier, especially if it's in a case, and I'm loving having that screen here. My only complaint is that these cables are just really long and they kind of hang there with no good way of storing it, and it doesn't fold up quite as nicely as the Mavic 2 Pro, so definitely a size advantage to the DJI if you want to keep things small. Now, obviously, there's a lot of things that are really neck on neck on these things, and one is going to be range. I mean, both of these drones can fly tremendously far, like miles. I haven't had any issues with drop signals on either one of them. Both have been amazing for me anytime that I've flown them. Also, speed, they're really a couple miles per hour difference. You won't notice that difference unless you're racing these. I will say in the wind, the gimbal on the Mavic 2 Pro kind of freaks out on me. It can disable obstacle avoidance. It really doesn't like it. So while the drone flies remarkably well and even a little bit faster in the wind than the Evo 2, I will say the Evo 2 is actually able to record in those windy environments a little bit better, albeit a little bit slower, but at least you're gonna get footage that is very usable and you're gonna keep that obstacle avoidance on. Now, when it comes to actually flying these, I really don't think you'll have an issue with either one of these drones. They're absolutely phenomenal. The Mavic is probably a little bit more stable, especially if you're in that tripod mode, which really just locks down that direction. But both of these were just incredibly stable, both close to the ground and in the sky. Now, you do have sensors all around both of these drones, and no, I'm not gonna take these high speed into a wall to test them. However, I will say that the Evo 2 is more sensitive, and we'll say that's probably a good thing if you are crashing into a tree. However, I did find I was turning it off quite frequently, because if you're within 30 feet, it would start slowing down and really kind of got annoying. And so while the obstacle avoidance is probably a little bit better on the Evo, it tends to be a little bit more sensitive, and I just ended up turning it off. Now let's get into the reason that you're probably here, and that is going to be for video quality and image quality. And that's because if you're spending $1,800 on a drone, it better be to make some awesome video for these. Now the DJI Mavic 2 Pro is the one that's kind of all over the place here, and there's a good reason for that. So a little explanation here, both of these drones have a 1-inch sensor, which is one of the largest you can get in these small fold-up drones right here, which is incredible. Now both of them have about the same resolution, which means for video, it is approximately a 6K sensor. Now the Mavic 2 Pro does not record actual 6K, which is not a problem at all. But when you have 6K of resolution and you need to get a 4K image from that, basically you have a couple different options on there, and the one that DJI uses is a little bit lower quality. So it doesn't have the processing power to oversample all those pixels, and so it line skips or pixel bins or uses some lower quality way of getting that 6K video to 4K. And that's kind of the explanation, sorry for that, but when we kind of get into the comparison for this drones, it makes a huge difference, because if you are recording in that normal wide angle full frame mode, or full sensor mode, I guess you would say, the Autel Evo 2 Pro is just way better in every way. Now the Evo can also shoot 6K, and so yes, in that 6K mode versus the 4K maximum resolution of the Mavic 2 Pro, the Evo looks amazing. Now if you start to throw the Mavic 2 Pro into that crop mode, which is their higher quality mode, things do get a little bit closer, but still, the Evo 2 Pro is going to be the winner right there. Now the Evo can also shoot 4K 60, and that is huge for me. I use 4K 60 all the time, so it is amazing being able to use it. There is a crop in that mode, so just keep that in mind. I actually don't mind it, because usually if I'm shooting 4K 60, it's to slow something down in post, and when I'm wanting to slow something down, I'm usually trying to focus in on a subject, which means I actually prefer having a crop mode in that mode, but just something to consider if you're trying to shoot a very wide angle frame. 4K 60 is not going to be the ticket for you there. So you're going to be shooting in 4K or 4K 30 or 6K 30 max resolutions if you want that wide frame mode on that one. But the Evo 2 is still going to yield amazing quality. Now, if you want to get even slower than that, both of these can shoot 1080p, actually 2K on the Evo 2 Pro, and 1080p, which is a little lower resolution on the Mavic 2 Pro, again at 120 frames per second. But if you're going to do this, I highly recommend getting the Evo 2 Pro, because the difference in these modes are just night and day. The Mavic is just mushy, it falls apart, it's really not even usable in a lot of situations, whereas the Evo 2 Pro is much better looking, holds on to detail really well. So if you're using it for 120 frames per second slow motion, this is definitely a huge improvement there. Same kind of thing when we start to get into low light. The Mavic 2 Pro kind of falls apart really easily. In fact, at 400 ISO, I don't even think it's really usable for me. The Evo 2 Pro handles it a lot better, so I would say you're probably looking at about a one-stop better video. Now, both of these are still pretty small sensors, so 400 ISO is probably going to be pushing it for video, but definitely the better option, anything above 200 ISO, is going to be the Evo 2 Pro. And I'm actually kind of curious if any of you noticed it, but anytime you shoot video in a log profile with the DJI Mavic 2 Pro, there is a horrible lens distortion. You have to download these profiles and add them to each clip to fix it, where log on the Evo had no issues. First off, hats off to Autel for even giving a drone that can shoot full 6K video with a huge 1-inch sensor, 4K 60, and second, you guys are going to need some higher speed SD cards to be able to shoot this kind of stuff. So I did pick up these Lexar Professional cards. They have 120 megabyte per second write speeds. They've been perfect for these crazy demanding 6K, 4K 60 files. So go check them out. I'll leave a link in the description below. So quite honestly, if you are a video shooter here, I can't think of a reason that you would go with the Mavic 2 Pro with this one as the option here. The clear winner for video of all kinds is going to be the Autel Evo. Now, when it comes to still images, the differences here are a lot closer, and I've shot amazing images with both of these drones, so I highly recommend them both for stills. But even so, I was seeing much better results both with your dynamic range and detail and low light ability with the Evo 2 Pro. In fact, look at these images here. The Evo 2 Pro is shot at 400 ISO with the Mavic 2 at 100 ISO. And honestly, I think the Mavic has a little bit more grain in those shadow areas there. So really showing the flexibility of the Autel drone, and overall when it comes to image quality, even though they're both very good, I would still give the easy edge to the Evo 2 Pro. So for me, it was pretty obvious that the Evo 2 Pro is just a better drone all around, especially if you are a video shooter. The differences are really massive, almost uncomparable. It kind of felt like a pretty big downgrade showing the Mavic 2 Pro next to the Evo 2. And I'll be honest, that was extremely unexpected for me because I've been shooting so many amazing images and videos with the Mavic 2 Pro. So it's not like this is a bad drone or anything. It's actually pretty unbelievable. Now, it is about $200 more expensive, so do keep that in mind. It is also a little bit larger of a drone, but nothing too unwieldy, and that is going to come with that bigger battery, better image quality for video and stills, and just overall a better drone right there. Now, Autel does sell an 8K version of this drone. Keep in mind that has a smaller sensor and it doesn't have a variable aperture, but we'll do a full comparison. I've got it coming up in about a week or two, so make sure you're subscribed. Hit me up, guys, if you have any questions to this. I appreciate you guys hitting like on this. I hope you guys are doing amazing, and I'll see you soon in a new video.